Welcome into episode 389 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, the Bruins fall to the Edmonton Oilers 4-0 last night. It's their fifth consecutive loss. They go 0-4-1 in this stretch. The Bruins got out-chanced, outworked, outpossessed. They got beat on special teams. They got beat on 5-on-5. There's a Bruins locker room that is short on answers right now. Bridget and Scott, what are some reasons for us and for fans, anybody, to feel positive about this team, if at all?
There aren't any right now. I don't really know how you could. I guess if you want to cling to something, it's that we have seen this team play well during stretches of the season. The last time they played Edmonton, that was a game they should have won. They went toe-to-toe in Edmonton and outplayed them the vast majority of that game, defended really well. We've seen stretches where they have defended really well. We know that has to be the foundation of this team, but it's just not happening nearly consistently enough. These last three games, some of the defensive breakdowns that have led to goals are just basic stuff. Puck watching, but having your eyes behind the net and letting a guy slip behind you in the slot happened twice last night with Adam Henrique. Both of his goals, he just found a soft spot in the coverage because Bruins had numbers back. Those weren't odd man situations. They were just puck watching. They didn't see Henrique coming in. It's like those sort of breakdowns in a game where there's just no excuse. Like, this wasn't a back-to-back. You have 4 straight losses, and you're facing one of the best teams in the league, and your attention to detail and focus isn't there. Like, what possible excuse is there for that?
Yeah, Brian, you didn't lead us in the best way possible, because I don't think we're at the point, maybe we'll get to it later in the episode, where we're like, we just going to talk about what's going wrong first before we can get to like how to fix it, because it certainly last night, like after the game, the vibe in the locker room was obviously not good. Like we knew it wasn't going to be good, right? But I still do feel like it was a step further than I felt in the past with how like the room was after the game, which we can get into, because I don't want to, steal the opening shifts or whatever, because I don't know which one of us is like a better starting point. But
Bridget, I think you should just go right into yours.
Okay,
I think it ties in.
Yeah, so my opening shift has to do with just like some of the comments that were made. Obviously, the Bruins lose 4-0. They can't score, but just to like hone in on a few comments in particular about just how dire the situation is, or how frustrating, and there's all sorts of different words that you could use to describe how things are going right now. But one thing that Coyle said pretty early on when he spoke to us last night was one of the reporters asked him, what's the identity of this team? And he was just, his tone was very frustrating. He said, it's something we need to work on, clearly. And then he said, scoring is not our problem right now. It's much more than that. And also, like, to tie that into something Zadorov said, he said, we're on a skid right now. Not much confidence out there. I think we're thinking too much. We're half a step behind everyone, not playing hard enough, not connected. So there's a lot of things. And I mean, at the very least, I feel like we got some honest answers in the kind of in the heat of the moment, because people are still feeling emotional about how things went down against the Oilers. So my biggest concern is the disconnected thing, because sometimes that's hard to get back together when you're losing and when you are frustrated and when things aren't going great. It feels like it could be an issue that, I don't know, maybe goes a little bit deeper.
Scott, why don't you give yours and I'll tie into yours. We can start with that.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest headlines coming out of this game, certainly something that will be one of the big talking points on sports radio whenever they squeeze it in between Patriots coaching search talk, is that there was a Fire Sweeney chant that broke out in the third period in the balcony at TD Garden. Now, it wasn't like the entire arena, it wasn't deafening, but it was very audible. And I can tell you that Don Sweeney was in management's box on level 9, and he definitely heard it. There's no way he could have missed it. And that was something new. Like, for you might hear, the one or two stray fans try to start something like that time to time, but that was definitely the loudest I've heard that.
I can second that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't think Sweeney's going to get fired right now. That wouldn't really line up with how the Jacobs usually operate. But I do think there's an interesting conversation to be had here, because this team really over the next month, because there seems to be league-wide chatter that like a lot of trade activity might get done before Four Nations, and not because when they come back from Four Nations, there's really only like a week and a half until the trade deadline. So there's kind of a sense that like teams might be getting stuff done before then. That leaves about a month to decide what you're going to do. And we've talked about how tough this team's schedule is in January. If they keep slipping, I wonder, like, what direction would Don Sweeney want to go, and what direction would ownership tell him to go or give him permission to go? Because generally, if you miss the playoffs as GM of the Boston Bruins, you lose your job. That's generally been the tipping point. Well, if the Bruins are going to sell, if they, in an honest moment, think that this season has to turn into a retool to get assets for the future, that means you're probably missing the playoffs. So does Don Sweeney actually have any interest in doing that? Would he need assurances from ownership that he'll get the chance to oversee a retool? Would ownership give that to him? Like, there's a lot of uncomfortable questions if this team continues to slide. Because the flip side of that is that Don Sweeney might feel like he has to make the playoffs to keep his job. And that would then motivate you to sell from the future to still try to cling to a playoff spot, which may not be the best thing for the organization long term.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so first thing, Bridget, I was hoping that by rattling off all the negative stats about them, that my question came off rhetorical rather than genuine about what if people should feel good about them or not. Because I've been saying this whole time, like, this team is not trending in the right direction. But I want to tie in both of your opening shifts, because before we started recording, Bridget was mentioning the quotes that the players mentioned. She mentioned in her opening shift. In addition, we were also talking about Charlie McAvoy had a quote about how I think before the game, somebody was asking about the defenseman trying to do too much or just not scoring lately, and everybody was trying to push too much offense. And McAvoy was making comments about how he was making reference to we aren't built that way to play that running game, and we cannot push offense. But after the game last night, Brad Marchand talked about, Scott, I believe you asked the question, are you guys, is playing a defensive structure, is that tiresome over an 82 game season? And Marchand was like, no, like, we just have to commit to it. And that we want to win games 1-0, 2-1. And that is not, to the question you're kind of asking, Scott, like, that's not a fun style of play for players. And I believe that some of the higher end players in the room are frustrated with the makeup of the team. And Jim Montgomery doesn't make up the team, and certainly Joe Sacco doesn't make up the construction of the team. It's on ownership. I mean, management. So I'm thinking that a lot of the Bruins some of the Bruins players, they're not dumb. They see that there's a lack of talent in their room, and because of that, they're being asked to play a certain way. So I just think from the players to management, there's some uneasy feelings. And to your opening shift, Scott, Okay, so what does that mean for Don Sweeney? We all know fans on Twitter and in the real world are upset with some of the construction of this team lately with Don Sweeney. If the players are too, and you have the fans chanting "Fire Sweeney," then it leads directly into what your opening shifts were, and absolutely, unless Don Sweeney has assurance from ownership, like Don, if you guys miss this year, it's okay. You're gonna get one. You're still not like, but that I don't think that's the case.
Even
And so
if
if
they
that's
said that, I would not believe it if I was him.
and that's totally valid. But to Scott's point, is Don Sweeney going to be a seller? If he turns around and turns into a seller this year, he knows he's kissing his job away because he's not going to keep it if they miss the playoffs. So that's like signing your own death wish. Is he going to do that? Do the Jacobs want to miss the playoffs? So I think right now, if you're Don Sweeney and ownership right now, in my opinion, they are trying to still salvage this season. And I think at the trade deadline or whenever that action happens, they're going to try to make some hockey trades, and they're not going to risk a lot of future assets in the process, but they're going to try to improve the team if the team is still around the playoffs. And I think what you guys are getting at is there needs to be a hard look in the mirror, because what fans and media and people that honestly want this team to do well, I'm not going to project, but this team is not trending well. But Don Sweeney's in there for job security. So is Cam Neely. That's why when your personal job is on the line, it can get in the way of what's best for the actual team long term. And this is what we're going to see unfold in the next couple of months here.
Yeah, and I think you have to try something long before the trade deadline. And the obvious answer, and we keep talking about it, and it sounds like a broken record, but like, how are you not giving at least one or two guys from Providence a shot right now? Like, this is now during this 5-game losing streak, 3 out of 5 games, they've scored 1 goal or fewer. Like, how, you have Patra, Lysell, Merkulov all playing well, producing in Providence. Do I think any of them are the savior? Probably not. But can they help spark this offense that so desperately needs a spark? Maybe. And, I was listening to Morning Brew with Jeffy and Razor before we started recording here on Wednesday morning. And, Razor made the point of like, there aren't going to be any roster changes these next few days because this Florida trip is their mom's trip. So, just from like a management of people, you're not going to waive someone or trade someone away, the day that their mom flies into town for a trip to Florida, which it is correct. Like that would be a New York Rangers-esque move if you like got rid of someone while they're hanging out with their mom down in, Fort Lauderdale or whatever. Like that would be pretty low. But they could still call someone up. They have enough cap space and an open roster spot to call someone up even without subtracting from the NHL roster right now. And I don't know if can you wait till the end of this trip? I know it's only 2 games, but like if that's 2 more losses, now you've lost 7 in a row. You're probably almost certainly outside of the top 8 at that point. You've already been passed by Ottawa. Montreal and Columbus are now right behind you, like mere percentage points behind you for 8th. So yeah, I think like the urgency needs to be turned up. I mean, we just saw them riding a 4-game losing streak, make 0 lineup changes. Like, how do you even justify that? Like, you have to do something. You can't just keep rolling the same thing out there night after night and expecting it's just going to like magically turn around.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we sound like a broken record. Like, call it Manpatra. I don't get the issue with that. It's not gonna hurt in any way. Like, we're well past the point, and we've thought this the whole season, though. Like, the philosophy to send him down was, get him development. But like, were they ever really in a position where they could sacrifice offense for development. And also he's been down there for a while now. Like, give him and he's been playing well. So the combination of you might need him, you could reward him. Like, there's a lot. And I definitely feel like we're at a point in this season where it's like, okay, this is another turning point here, because we're in a 5-game losing streak. You see the change in tone again. Like, the locker room in November, right before Monty was fired, and the tone around the team was really negative. It kind of recovered, and then here we are again. And I do think that Coyle also alluded to the fact that personnel needed to get changed. Like, if you really read, if you really like combined his tone with what he was saying, it was like, yeah, no, something's got to give. And it felt like people know that the answer's probably not there. So maybe Patra helps. Like, technically he's not there, and maybe that helps, but it's really an outside answer at this point. Probably. So it's something to think about. Like, would they do something before the trade deadline, like significantly before the trade deadline? And Scott, you mentioned 4 Nations, which starts in February. Like, that would mean that a move would be coming the next like 3 weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks.
So let me ask you guys a question though, because I'm all on board with everything you guys are talking about. But before we go bigger picture, I'm gonna keep it to last night's game against Edmonton real quick. Do you feel like Patra or Elias or anybody coming up last night, do you think anybody that they'd be replacing in the lineup was the issue last night? Or was the issue last night players that would be there with Patra and Lysell in the lineup, like Charlie McAvoy, Elias Lindholm, Brad Marchand, Pavel Zacha, David Pastrnak? Like, I mean, obviously those guys aren't going anywhere, but I'm looking at some of the Bruins' top players that are relied upon right now, and outside of Pastrnak, in this last week of time, they've been nowhere to be seen. And in fact, they've had some rough moments here. Now, I might be illustrating a bad week for them in particular, but like last night, to me, the problem wasn't even Wahlstrom and Frederick and Brazeau. I thought they were actually probably their best line. And the fourth line, like, yeah, like it leaves, some to be desired on some nights, but I only expect so much from them. So last night I'm looking at the top 6 and some of your top defensemen.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely needed more from your top guys. They weren't nearly good enough, but you started to touch on it there at the end. The Bruins' fourth line was awful Tuesday night. Like, every single shift, pinned in, chasing, defending for their lives, on for at least 1 goal against, maybe 2. No, I think 1, but multiple quality chances. The Lorei Peak pair, I know we're not talking about defensemen in terms of call-ups, but the Lorei Peak pairing was awful. You can't roll that needs to be broken up for a while. You need to do something else. That pairing is in a really bad place right now.
Lorei was -3.
Yeah. And so, yes, you needed more from the top. You're right. The third line was actually good. Like, I wouldn't even say, like, yeah, just relative to the rest of the team. They actually played a good game, period. So, yeah, that's fine. Those guys can get another chance, but I would have zero issue with, you want to keep Kastelik in, obviously, because of what he brings physically. You can easily take Koepke and or Beecher out of this lineup. And if that, like, however you decide to line it up, it is fine. Maybe Brazeau's a fourth liner, maybe Wahlstrom's a fourth line. Like, you can try some different things. But there were also issues at the bottom of your lineup in this game where they just looked really overmatched.
Yeah.
I feel like Elias Lindholm was like, I feel like I didn't notice him for the first like 8 minutes of the game, and it was like to the point where I like looked at the lineup, I was like, he's in, but like, is he hurt? And I like look at the bench and like, no, he's there. Like, there was chunks of that game where I'm like, oh, did he go to the locker room? Like, because I just felt like I didn't see him do anything for a while. And yeah, that's obviously not good when someone on, your your top, or they have them listed as a top line. I would call it their second line. Is just like you don't even see them.
I mean, the way I would describe Lindholm's game so far this year, given his contract, given the role that they want him to be, whether or not he can do it or not at a previous level he used to is one thing. You know, he's done the little things well a lot this year. Little things don't really jump off the page all the time. So I'm not discrediting that element of his game, but he just doesn't strike me as a dangerous offensive player. Like when the puck's on his stick, more oftentimes than not, I'm thinking to myself, it's probably going to die on his stick. Like there's not really there, and I'm not even pointing at his production, because you could have the amount of points he has so far, and maybe he's just snake bitten. But he just, when he's on the ice, him and Marchand and Coyle, like they have their moments, and Marchand and Lindholm have had their moments. But by and large, they just don't strike me as a combination where there's a lot of holding your breath as the opposition when they're out there. So I mean, I think last night's another example, and you kind of pointed it out, Bridget. Like one of the things I was upset with last night, and Scott, I know online you mentioned to me some of the top three lines that did generate some looks, and I wasn't even disputing that. But big picture, you're on a 4-game losing streak, and you get outshot 14-4 in the first period, and the ice was tilted. And I know that there's a talent discrepancy between the Bruins and the Oilers, but they're all NHL players, and there are games where any given team, just based off of effort and not being denied, can tilt the ice and be on their toes. And that's an alarming thing for me last night, to see them on their heels for the most part. Like, yes, they had some ozone time. It wasn't really extended. I found the Bruins like chasing the Oilers more than the other way around in that first period, and I just wanted to see the Bruins. I wanted to see them impose their game, and it's easier said than done. But is that too much to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I wasn't as down on their start to the game, and this kind of gets to what we were going back and forth about on Twitter. Like I thought the Bruins for the first 14 minutes weren't great, but were fine. They were in it, and I thought each of the top three lines had some good shifts. The biggest problem, and this has become a recurring theme, is they can't get shots through. They can't finish. They had 18 shot attempts in the first period. 14 of them were, 8 of them missed the net, and 6 more were blocked. And to me, that just speaks to what we've been talking about, which is the lack of offensive talent and the lack of offensive finish. And I don't just mean finish in terms of burying shots, like shooting percentage, but finish in terms of translating possession or a cycle into a scoring chance. When they face a good defense, they can't do it. And the Oilers are a good defense. Like if people haven't been following that team's transformation over the last couple years, they are now a very good defensive team. And you would see when the Bruins did get in the zone, Oilers were packed in and committed to blocking shots, to taking away lanes, and the Bruins don't have enough guys who can break through that. Whether that's through creative passing, opening up seams, or through having a shot that's dangerous from the dot. Someone who can score without being right on top of the crease. And they just don't have that. And that's how you end up with blocked shots and missing the net, because guys just don't have the ability to work through the problem and break down a structured defense.
Right. Yeah, the talent's not there. The speed isn't there to get around, shooting lanes that are filled, or to your point, Scott, like execute plays to penetrate those that structure. And yeah, like there's no doubt about it. I just find there's just some red flags with this team. Like Trent Frederick gets in a fight, tries to boost his team. Swayman tries to get involved the next shift or two, but it's and then next thing you know, they're, I think that the Oilers scored right after that again. So
they scored a power play goal because Frederick got the extra 2 minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. So you give it and you take it away. But is that what happened there? Was that the power play goal?
That was Zacha gets a shorthanded breakaway, misses the net, which shocker, Pavel Zacha missed the net again. This has become by far my biggest issue with him, is how often he just has great chances and straight up misses the net entirely. And then Charlie McAvoy gets the puck and for God knows whatever reason tries to thread a pass backwards through the neutral zone that gets picked off and turned into a McDavid breakaway. And of course, Connor McDavid is not missing the breakaway. He scores. Was that a baffling sequence?
Was that a miss? I thought that was a blocker save, and then it went over the net. Did he miss the net completely from that close? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. Don't get me wrong.
I thought he did. Let's see how they officially scored it.
I mean, either way, it's a massive missed opportunity.
Well, I was gonna say that the issue I had on that play was McAvoy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
it was. He had possession of it in the offensive zone. And
yeah, they gave Skinner credit for the save. So okay.
But it's this team's not getting a ton of grade A chances, and it'd be nice to see one go in that moment, and then it leads to what Bridget's talking about, which is just the mismanagement of the puck with McAvoy.
So. Who you normally would trust with the puck, and when you're in the offensive zone and Zacha's caught deep, the turnover there is really it's gonna hurt you either way. Then one of the other Bruins fell down at the line, so there was two guys back trying to cover McDavid.
I think it may have been Carlo.
Yeah, I think it was Carlo. Yeah, he fell right over the line, and then that left one guy back to defend, and they couldn't because it's McDavid. But yeah, I mean, that was maybe a turning point, like you mentioned. Frederick starts with a fight. His hand was all sorts messed up. I don't know if you saw it, but something happened with him and Perry that he was not happy about. I saw Corey Perry on the penalty bench. Not if you read his lips, he said, "I swear to God, I didn't." So I have no idea what caused it necessarily, but they gave Frederick the extra 2 minutes for roughing. I thought maybe they're going to give him instigator. I don't know. I don't necessarily think there should have been a power play in the first place, but either way, it's another moment where things went from bad to worse. And then when they pulled Swayman too, with 4 minutes left, I'm like, this is going to be an empty net goal rather than a goal for the Bruins, because at what point in the season have they showed that they can take advantage of an extra attacker? They have one extra attacker goal this year. And then they don't take advantage on the power play. So when they have the man advantage of any kind, I just wasn't real. I didn't have a lot of faith that they were going to score. Never mind, they were going to score 3.
Yeah, I was going to say, it doesn't even matter. The game's over. It's 3-0. So you might as well pull the goal with 10 minutes left for all I care.
Well, and that's
or not at all. Just let them figure it out.
And again, there's so much that bothers you in a stretch like this, in a game like that. I mean, so 2 of the 3 goals with the goalie in the net is 2 of your leaders giving the puck away. McAvoy, granted it's shorthanded, but I mean, there was no reason to make that mistake. And then
just turn around and dump it back in deep.
Yeah. So McAvoy mismanages the puck there, right? And then Coyle, turns the puck over deep in his own zone. I know sometimes those plays are hard, but you just can't do it. And so you're having leaders make mistakes. And then that first period, Scott, I really don't even disagree about your assessment that they played just okay. All I really was saying was you want to see them play better than that, and coming off the situation that they've been in down, on a 4-game skid. So even just okay for me was disappointing to see. And then the second period, they get outshot 15-8. And so the only period they outshoot the Oilers is the third period. And I know shots on goal isn't everything. There's a lot that precedes that too, in advanced metrics as well. But they get outshot 14-10 in the third. But by that point, the game's over. So I don't know. It's a frustrating product right now.
Yeah, and I think that the second period was worse to me because, you mentioned McAvoy before the game saying we can't push for offense or whatever. I thought they did in the second period, and they started giving up odd man rushes against. And Swayman made some big saves during that stretch, but they were only going to hold so long, and ultimately it's the McDavid breakaway to make it 2-0. But yet, like it's a 1-0 game, and I thought they started cheating to try to create offense. And again, it's like it just kind of speaks to they can say that they like understand the process and how they need to play, but it doesn't look like they really believe it, because if you do, then in a 1-0 game, you should be confident in how you're supposed to be playing and just keep working. And they didn't look like a team that believed that, okay, if we just dump in, forecheck, win a battle down low, low to high, get to the net, like keep it simple. They weren't playing like a team that believed that was going to get them a goal. They looked like they thought, well, we got to take some chances. And it's like, you do that when it's 2-0 in the third period. 1-0 early in the second period, you shouldn't have to do that. And yet this team looked like they thought they did.
I want to like take a look back at the losing streak as a whole as well. And by like, they could have found a way to win, you know, the Toronto game, or they could have found a way to win the Islanders game that went to overtime and they lost. But one thing that Charlie Coyle said too, and I think it applies to last night's game by itself and then the losing streak as a whole, is like, we can't find a way to stop the bleeding. So like they can't, like they haven't had that solution to get out of this skid, like this, what's plaguing them during this time. And but earlier in the losing streak, Scott, I think you said this about the Capitals game, like you weren't very discouraged, even though it was a loss, because they played well and they had a good push. Like a few of the other games during the losing streak, there were good pushes at the end, or there was like a majority of the game they were outplaying the opponent, but they still lost. Like you could not say that about this Oilers game. And I think someone called it, like one of the reporters when we were talking to Sacco after the game, called it a measuring stick game. And like, well, how did you actually measure up to this team that's good and it's going to be a playoff team and that has talent? And, you know, obviously they didn't measure up very, very closely. Maybe it was an off night, but it doesn't feel like that when it's the fifth loss in a row. So yeah, there were different points in the losing streak where they were outplaying teams, but they then you get back to the talent issue, like the finishing, the talent, like maybe isn't there. And it feels like we're just spinning our wheels because we're how many, 43 games in now? 43
games. 43
yeah.
games then. And they're minus 24 team goal differential. You know, none of their metrics at this point are a fluke, in my opinion. It's too far into the season. I know there's expected metrics that are in their favor, and you know, I've talked about those, and that's great. But you know, the reality is saying something else. And you know, this stretch this season, it's just, I was telling you guys before we started recording, like this mix, it's just to this point in the year, it's an off mix. And I say that because there's always something that is ailing this team. They're never, this team has yet, in my opinion, I don't believe, maybe you guys can think of a time. I mean, maybe a couple of games against some weaker teams, but there hasn't really been a stretch of time this year where special teams, 5-on-5 offense and defensive game, and goaltending has all been clicking at the same time. Like, if not even for one game, or at least a couple in consecutive. So it's always something. And for example, last night, we're not talking about Jeremy Swayman. Like, he was, you know, he got beat on some clean shots, and none of us are blaming him for those goals necessarily. But nobody else really helped, you know, bail out the goaltending on the defense. It's, you know, sometimes the offense picks up for a game or two, and then the defense slides. The defense picks up for a game or two, and the offense slides. So, yeah, this mix is just really, really infuriating.
Yeah, well, it hasn't. They haven't had everything clicking because the power play hasn't clicked at all at any point this year. So even if other stuff click, it's like I can easily tell you without even looking that there hasn't been a stretch where it's all been going, because that's never been going. And one thing that they should do is, if you're going to keep the same personnel and not totally mix up these units again, make the second unit the top unit. Like, start them and play them more than half of the power play. Because not that they're like lighting, they're not McDavid, Draisaitl, and Evan Bouchard out there, but they look so much better than the top unit. And again, the bar's on the ground for that, because the top unit looks awful. But like the Bruins' first power play last night, top unit gets a minute 15, does absolutely nothing, turning the puck over, it's getting cleared down the ice. Second unit comes on for the last 45 seconds and at least has some zone time and wins some battles to get pucks back, gets it to the net a couple times. And it's like, yeah, there's nothing complicated there, and they didn't score, but like, at least they're doing something. At least they're doing the basics. They're in the zone and they're putting pucks to the net. Like, that's a lot more than you can say of the top unit right now. So at the very least, I think, and listen, like, that also has the added benefit of lighting a fire under some of your best players' asses. Like, you think McAvoy, Pasternak, Marchand are going to be happy about coming on a minute 15 in and playing 45 seconds? No. Okay, then go out and earn more time. Like, I would not keep giving that unit the default minute 15 that they get to start every power play. When at any point this season have they earned that?
Yeah, I thought that you were going to say, what does it hurt for them to bring in another coach that could help with the power play? Because that's another thing that they have the ability to do and haven't yet. And I understand it's about finding the right person, and them, a lot of these people probably already have other jobs you have to coax them out of, and the situation maybe isn't perfect. They maybe haven't found the right fit yet, but it feels like there should be urgency in that department, because like, I almost asked a question last night, like, how willing are you to make like more drastic changes to the power play? But then I didn't, because I remembered that they don't have options that really allow them to make drastic changes to the power play in terms of personnel. So it's like, all right, well, like, what can you really do that's going to help by, changing up the personnel that they currently have? Because I don't really think that moving some guys from the fourth line onto the power play is going to do anything, like, or like changing up your defenseman on the power play. Who's going to step into that role anyway? Like, there's just not a lot of options. Like, I don't think you're seeing Parker Weatherspoon run a power play. I don't think you're seeing Cole Koepke on a power play unit. Like, the other options that they have aren't any better. So,
well, what's funny is, and I'm not saying that they should or are going to, although I obviously wouldn't be opposed to it, call this player up. But, in Georgi Merkulov's brief time up this year, there were some times where, he looked like he was he looked okay on the power play. Like, you could see his creativity. Now, I don't think he generated many points on it, because nobody has, but I don't know, like that, like, there are players that aren't on the current team down in Providence. Like, they just have a more of a natural creative skill set in mind. But those guys aren't up right now. So to your point, Bridget, like, right now, there's only so much you can do. I should add, because there's something I want to give attention to for the last 10, 15 minutes here. But quickly, Hampus Lindholm was back on the ice skating. I think, was it yesterday morning, Scott, at the Garden, or the day before, which is positive development.
Tuesday morning, he was skating on his own at the Garden before the team's morning skate. So Psycho said there's still no timeline. You got to figure, with how much time he missed, I think you're looking at least a couple more weeks, maybe even till the end of the month, or if it drags, maybe even hold him out through Four Nations. But regardless, like, it's just encouraging to see him on the ice. I think we all agree, like, he can certainly help this team. But again, if we're talking 2, 3, 4 weeks out, like, what is he even going to be returning to? Because this team has a really tough schedule and is not in a good place right now.
Yeah. And by the way, I thought of this earlier, but now it's probably a good time to ask it. Like, their next game is against Florida. Like,
is it Tampa first?
Is it Tampa first? I don't know. Well, their upcoming schedule, yes, Tampa first and then Florida. So Tampa Thursday, Florida Saturday. Like,
good luck, boys.
Yeah, good luck. Like, that's what I'm trying to say is, like, if they lose these 2 games, like, is that like a knockout punch? Like, could Florida be like the knockout punch for them in the regular season this year rather than in the playoffs?
That's a good point. I mean, maybe. I mean, there's still a lot of hockey to go, but I mean, we've talked about the importance of this month in this stretch, and it certainly wouldn't be an encouraging. I mean, at that point, you're talking midway through the month, and they'd have a 1-7 record or something like that, so it wouldn't be good. Yeah.
Do you guys remember? When they lost those first 2 games, 2 of their first 4 games were against Florida. They're 2 bad losses, and I said at the time that in retrospect, getting Florida right out of the gate probably wasn't good. They probably needed some time to find themselves, new roster. They got to work through some things, and now it's like they're finally facing Florida again after 3 months of not seeing them, and it's like they have not found themselves. They are not in a better spot. This really could be very ugly.
They're more lost. They're walking through the woods without a flashlight at night. So they're in tough shape right now. But on Lindholm, just one last thing on Lindholm. When he comes back, like, it's not fair to assume he'll hit the ground running either. Like, he's coming back from 3 months, almost 3 months off. So, guys, I know we have a hard out in about, call it 10 minutes. I wanted to bring this up real quick. There's an article I saw on Twitter this morning from REG Media, and the author's name is Mark D'Amico. So I don't know if either of you guys know who that is, but the article,
I've heard the name, but I don't really know him.
So the article basically confirms through an NHL executive to their publication that the Bruins are one of the teams that are interested in. That are talking with the Canucks about the availability of JT Miller or Elias Pettersson. I'll just read a quote from the article because Sweeney and Kyle Dubas and who else? Bill Armstrong over in Utah. They were at a Canadiens Canucks affiliate game recently. And there's a quote here. It says, I don't know. As for which one of the Canucks top 6 centers the Bruins could be targeting, quote from a source. I don't know who for sure, but I know the Bruins want to get deeper and younger, up the middle, not older. The source said that seems like Pettersson, but it's not about who they want. It's about who the Canucks decide to move on from. And then later on in the article, it mentions that a likely ask from the Canucks would be a top 6 center or top 4 defenseman, a top prospect, or first round pick, depending on where the acquiring team would likely be picking. And then a mock here would be, I'm thinking Mason Lohrei or Matt Patra on top of a player like Frederick or Zacha, the first source said. So I don't know how credible this outlet is, but, I don't think it's a secret that the Bruins would be in on this. So I feel comfortable bringing it up. And obviously this team needs a big shakeup, probably outside realistically of some of the kids in Providence. I think, what do you guys make of all this?
Well, they should be they should be talking to the Canucks. They should be interested in one or both of those guys. We've brought it up before, but number 1 centers don't become available very often. Teams lock those guys up. They don't get to free agency. They rarely get traded. Jack Eichel's obviously a notable recent example. And Vegas went above and beyond to get him. Took a chance because he had the unique neck injury fusion surgery, and it paid off. Their boldness was rewarded. I think JT Miller and Elias Pettersson are both number 1 centers. They are definitely better than anything you have at center, and so they should be interested. And where that leads and whether either one of them actually gets moved or what, to me, I know that there's always a limit where you're saying we can't give up that much, but nothing that you just named exceeds that limit to me. Like that, there's a pretty far I would be willing to go to get one of those guys because it's either one of them is like it's exactly what you need. You need a real number one center because you still don't have one. So yeah, it was weird because like when teams first started surfacing during this, the Bruins weren't one of them. Like it was Rangers, Canadians, a couple of others. And I was like, why would the Bruins not be in on that? And they tend to keep things closer to the vest, so maybe they just weren't leaking their interest or whatever. But yeah, they should be. They should absolutely be on the phones and following that situation closely.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of sounds like in this situation, if the article's accurate, like that the other side leaked the information, like not that the Bruins were the ones, but like that the people on the Canucks side were like, hey, this is what we've seen, too, off the record.
Because I mean, they want to spark a bidding war.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they have a reason to, and yeah, but Brian, the guys that you mentioned, like obviously people here like Matt Patra, but for a Pettersson, that's a deal you make, right? And Lohrei, I thought he would have a better season if he was playing like, the way that I think he can. He maybe even would be worth more to sway a piece like that to get Pettersson. His upside's still there though, so but maybe he would be worth a little bit more. You wouldn't have to give up something on top of it or too much more on top of it. But like I don't know if they'd want a Bruins draft pick. Like it feels like it would need to be probably a multiplayer deal, which could include a prospect or guys on the active roster. So like if they want Pavel Zacha, like it would make sense for them to want one of Zacha and Patra because they're centers, right? Like they're going to want a center back. And then what you add on top of that, could it be a defenseman or Frederick? Like,
yeah. Well, and at some point you have to make the salary work too, where Miller is, I think, 8 or 8.5, and Pettersson is over 11 million a year. So Miller's a little bit easier to make the salary match, just because both teams are cap teams, so you have to. Pettersson, like, there's got to be like I would go to, Hampus Lindholm might be a starting point there. We know the Canucks are looking for defense, but obviously his injury kind of complicates that. So, but yeah, like Patra, Lohrei picks, like sure, but somewhere along the way, like you have to get those numbers close to matching.
And Patra, Lohrei picks, those are too many unknowns for a Canucks team parting ways with a potential number one center. They have the luxury of having two number one centers. It's kind of like Boston having the two number one goalies recently in Allmark and Swayman. But
and what Scott's saying is like Lohrei and Patra, like you're getting rid of less than $2 million of cap, and you're bringing in 11 or whatever. So
right, it doesn't work financially, and just based off of just NHL pedigree doesn't work. Like Lohrei at some point, like you can't just be, a purely offensive defense. Like you have to have some ability to defend, and he just hasn't shown that yet. So, if I'm the Canucks, you already have Quinn Hughes. I don't know how interested I am in Mason Lohrei. I probably would be more interested in like a Brandon Carlo than a Mason Lohrei if you're trying to get a top 4 caliber defenseman.
Scott said Hampus Lindholm, who's
definitely. Oh yeah, Lindholm.
I think Hampus Lindholm would be the one that they're like really interested in because
he's like
it seems like that's exactly what they feel like they're missing. Where it's like they have the great great all around defenseman in Quinn Hughes, but then like there's kind of a lack of mobility on that blue line after that. So yeah, that's why like Lohrei could still have some interest because I do think further down their D-core they need more defensemen who can contribute offensively. so do the Bruins, but whatever. Like, you got to sacrifice something. So, Carlo, I wonder, like, would they just consider him like a Tyler Myers clone? Like, is there really room? Like, is there really room for both of them?
Yeah, I forgot they have Myers over there. That's right. What about if there was a first round pick involved in a package? Would you guys be willing to part with a first round pick?
Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. All right. Something to keep an eye on. So, yeah, it seems there seems to be a sentiment that one of those guys is going to get moved. There's too much talk about it, and it's just too much. And as Scott mentioned earlier, like maybe the Four Nations kind of kicks up the trade deadline a little bit this year. So we'll find out soon enough. But any final thoughts from you guys?
Nope. We are recording this Wednesday morning, so I'm just getting ready to head into practice, and we'll see. We'll see if there's any call up or any changes at all, or if it's just more status quo.
Oh, there will be. Right when Bridget uploads, there will be. We all know that.
I was not going to speak it into existence, Brian.
It's 10 a.m. as we're wrapping up here. We're just going to get all the work done.
I'm not recording.
10:45 a.m. Bruins trade for Elias Pettersson.
I don't even have time today. I have coaches calls, guys. I'm busy. So yeah, well, actually, I guess in that case, we'd have to find something. What we would do was it would be 2 separate episodes. I'm not fucking editing this.
No, that's totally okay.
I think a live stream of Bridget's head exploding would. I think we'd get some views.
Yeah, who wants to see that? Leave a comment.
All right. Well, the Bruins head down south to Florida to try to not get their asses kicked by the Panthers and Lightning the way the Bruins are going right now. So they do have Tampa on Thursday night. So we'll talk to you on Friday to recap that game. Thank you all for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.